Oh, yes, that's the intro. What was the? Oh, it was reminding me of like freaking Finding Nemo, the teacher. That's what it reminded me of.
All right. Welcome back to another Jazz basketball breakdown. Um, Almost lost to the Pistons.
Imagine if they hadn't won a
Oh
game.
my
What if the
gosh.
pressure would have been on top of that? Would that have been enough to push over the top? Because I felt like we should have probably lost as it was.
Yeah, our defense is like throughout the whole game, but especially in the first half, was awful.
I mean, we scored the most points in a home game ever.
And
But we also gave up the most points in a home game ever. So both teams were kind of defense optional.
yeah, and we allowed so many open looks. So many open looks this game.
And to the point where we played a lot more zone second half, felt like, and I guess to try and dampen that, and it still wasn't doing great. I don't know.
This was one of the more frustrating wins, I guess, for me. Just watching this game was very frustrating.
As far as the arc that we were on, it feels like a little bit of a step backwards. It seems like we're going away from more of our stronger defensive lineups and kind of searching out. This game, it felt like we were searching out a little bit more offense, isolation stuff than we had in several of the past games. There were some individual performances that were fun to watch, including a couple ex-Jazz men on the Pistons. Bogey
Bojan
was looking nice.
Holy crap, that dude couldn't miss, it felt like.
He and that's why it was tough to see him go as a Jazz fan, right? I mean, he was
that's
great
why we
player,
brought
great
him
teammate.
in to be the third star with Donovan and Gobert.
He was talented, man. Put on a show all over the court. I mean, his shooting map was full. That was fun to watch. Burks as well.
Yeah.
What a shot to put it into overtime.
I was just stunned, dude. That
what
goes
a
in.
Shot
it's just like, oh,
to put it into overtime. I mean, he gets the pass right back off the inbounds and is sprinting. Ends up, I can't remember if he went off 1 foot or two, but he was floating forward and to the right and pinged it. Man, what a shot.
Incredible shot.
After Markkanen had just hit a big shot and we actually had made the right play to get him that shot and everything. So, man, that was exciting. Some offensive performances. Cade Cunningham is a legitimate offensive talent. That guy,
he's growing into a star every bit in his own right, and a leader on that team, which has been cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, I said it to you probably 3 or 4 times during the game. How does that team lose 28 games in a row?
So much talent on that team. So, but glad we did not lose to them after everything. And so there's a lot of talent on their team. They're not even playing. They're barely playing Asar Thompson. It's kind of weird, some of the stuff that's going on with that team. I don't know. Lots of question marks. Obviously, someone outsider looking in. We watch only a couple games of theirs a year.
Yeah, and so they are, I mean, how many games into the season are we? They've won 3 games. Think about this. Monty Williams, their coach, which they went out and put together a very attractive total package to bring him on. Part of it was, I guess, the sickness of his wife and stuff, and being able to have the care around her, and which is really high level of a team to be able to include that. But they're paying him over $13 million this year. You think about it.
Yeah,
they are very on track, just for the coach's salary, to be paying more than $1 million per win on the season to their coach.
Right. That's rough.
Rough. And this year was supposed to be out of the rebuild for them.
Yeah,
they were coming in supposed to be. They're supposed to starting to be contending, and it was no more, lottery pick stuff for them. So there's some real pressure building there on that organization, and some of the things the owners come out and said, because they're feeling pressure with the whole sell the team push. So they've got a lot of things going, but they have a base of talent. Just they cannot put it together and have their players play their role tightly with each other, and they give up wide open shots down the stretch when it gets close. I mean, things like that. So, anyways, I don't know. That's rough though for a coach to have that big of a salary, paying out over $1 million per win.
That's pretty bad. But a couple big performances on the Jazz end as well.
Absolutely.
Markkanen hit a big time shot, to give us the lead. Obviously, at the end of the fourth. What ended up with 31-7?
Yes,
I believe, and played really well tonight. It felt like we spent way too long not giving him the ball at all, and him just kind of either being a decoy or stand in the corner type player. His points really felt like they came as an afterthought tonight.
He ended up having 18 shots, 7 of 8 from the free throw line, which I like.
Yes.
He was getting there and being physical and taking advantage of matchups. It felt like through a lot of the fourth, he really wasn't getting touches. Especially when he's, shooting like he was tonight. He was shot 4 of 8 from 3. Even when he comes around those screens, this is something I mentioned. I don't care if there's a defender on him and it's contested. Get him the ball.
And that's the thing, is 90% of the time going through that motion, it was Alec Burks or Bojan Bogdanovic guarding him and being physical with him. They do not have the size or strength to slow him down. Neither does Isaiah Livers. None of those guys on that team.
I don't care if they push him an extra foot or 2 out of where he would have been.
Just give him the ball at that point. In that motion, allow him to catch that in the paint. He will score 9 times out of 10.
Make them top guard that action. Make them double it so that then we get the looks off the backside and all the counters off of it. So
we, like you said, tonight, instead of playing within the offense, we really relied on hero ball, one-on-one.
A lot more isolation for sure.
And it's just, I don't know. For me, not a fan of watching that style of play because it's a live or die by that, right? There's really no one else in a rhythm, and you're kind of just at the mercy of 1 or 2 players.
Yeah, there are times during a game that it happens and it makes sense, but it seems like this game we went way across the line on where it felt like we had found a rhythm in that mode of playing in the last handful of games. Wanted to bring up Fontecchio. Had a stretch. Was it third quarter or was it the fourth? Of third, like 3 plays in a row where he grabs a big rebound over Burks and scores, gets an and one on Duren. Has another one where he goes out and kind of after a couple of extra passes kind of gets the ball on the far side and hits a above the break 3 that was contested. And then after that, he gets a hand on a pass from Cunningham to Duren. And the ball tips around, he grabs it, and then that pass ahead.
Oh, my.
To Keontae George.
He jumps up in the air and has to, around the defender and still on a freaking line and full court to Keontae for a dunk. That was impressive.
It wasn't like it wasn't contested. Alec Burks was sprinting to be able to get into that ball, but still fitted into that tight window. Fantastic play. Overall, just a great game from him. 6 of 11. Ended up with 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals.
Yeah.
The amount of times that he played tough defense as well and contested, he's really turning into a valuable piece. I felt like I was one of the few preseason that was really hopeful he would have a good season. We always hear about the European players coming over, and that first year is just really hard for them. And it really takes a full year for them to get comfortable. A commenter of ours earlier on brought up the fact that he had some issues as well with his ankle, that he had a surgery in the offseason as well.
Right.
And we knew that coming in he was a scorer, but his level of defense, the way that he is driving to the basket now, I didn't realize that was a part of his arsenal. I don't know if that's come lately or if I'm just out of the loop there.
Right.
His defensive ability, passing overall, he's putting together a body of work that...
Don't die.
I feel like I'm going to die. That I feel like I'm okay sitting next to you for the last 2 months, bro. But Fontecchio, super impressed with the overall body of work and what you've been doing. It's That guy needs to get paid somewhat this offseason.
Yeah, he has really taken that next step. And at the start of the year, it did not look like he was. At the start of the year, it looked like, oh man, he did not improve at all.
Right.
And because he was bad at the start of the year, he had some games last year. I mean, I was at a game last year that was arguably his worst performance. So it's been really cool to see the development of this dude.
Absolutely, man.
A guy who's really effective whether he's starting or not.
And it'll be interesting to see really what his role is. I guarantee you that teams are reaching out to us about him.
Right.
They have to be. Just the value of that kind of a player at that salary. And man, great vision by Danny Ainge, because Ainge had looked at him before with, was it with the Celtics? That they looked at, kind of had a conversation of bringing him over, and it didn't quite work. And so he kind of still had his eye on him.
Yeah.
And Fontecchio ends up being like a 27-year-old rookie. Comes in last year, goes through the pains, but man, there's great value in having him come in and being on a pretty much a veteran minimum, I think, or just a little bit more. Great value.
Right. Sorry, this is driving me nuts. I'm going to have to touch the camera.
Hey, we're back.
That goes away. Anyway, obviously can't talk about tonight without talking about 36 points from Clarkson. You know, and hit a lot of really tough shots down the stretch. There's no question about it. I think I might be one of the very few people who just can't stand watching him play even when he scores 36 points. There's no question he hit super tough shots down the stretch. Like there's no denying that. I hate that. Like I said, it's not my style of basketball I enjoy watching for super long stretches. I understand it happens throughout games with your stars and stuff like that. But man, you just are at the mercy of hoping he does make those shots because no one else is in a rhythm, and he's awful defensively. He is such a negative on the defensive side of the court that it is so frustrating.
To the point where when we were running our zone and he was kind of, he was down in the lower post there, he would just sit in that spot.
Not move.
Yeah, guarding basically the left post of ours, watching that. And he would just sit there. He wouldn't, as a zone, by design, if your guards have to move over, you're supposed to all kind of collectively move. And that's the design of a zone, right? You're all one organism.
They got a crap ton of wide open looks in the elbow three, and it's because they would pull our guard over, rotate over, and then he just kind of stays back.
Sits there on his guy. So there were a couple of stretches during the game where Will Hardy weathered some pretty rough storms from him offensively, a chunk of possessions, and the defense was still kind of what it was, and he left him in. And eventually, tonight, it paid off with him finishing like crazy in the fourth.
Right.
With a whole bunch of no, yes kind of buckets, right?
Yes.
But man, the dude has an uncanny ability to hit an abnormally high amount of those shots, especially when it matters. It's such an abnormal thing. So an incredible skill set. Will Hardy weathered some of those moments longer than I would have. But today is one of those where it ends up and comes out in a win and 36 points, on decent efficiency after his triple-double game the other day. So I wonder what the front office and the coaches are looking at as far as what is the real core group going forward.
And that's something, too, that
what moves are going to be made
bothers me and frustrates me more right now, right, is man, we are hurting Keontae George, running him nonstop with Clarkson. Because tonight, 90% of the minutes he was on the court, it was dribble up the court, hand the ball to Clarkson, go stand somewhere else, and not do anything else. And just allowing zero growth or creation or ball handling from Keontae, who we want to be our starting point guard.
We've really gone away from his usage there. And I don't think we need to overwhelm him with a whole ton of it, but kind of his game is changed since he came back from injury, and the team has somewhat changed. So, I mean, I would like to see more usage going through him. was kind of crazy to me how both teams didn't really play very many minutes of a very high level defensive player, us with Agbaji, them with Asar Thompson.
Right.
There have been times that I've wondered if each player would be better on the other team.
Right.
They need shooters like crazy and a defender. I think Agbaji would fit great on their team. We need playmakers. Asar Thompson, many in our camp, I hear, felt that he could be a point guard when they had him, do the workouts and when they were assessing him for the draft process. So it's interesting how the roles would probably fit better on the other team. And as much as I like Agbaji, Asar Thompson would be one of the few players that I would be ecstatic about.
I love Agbaji, and man, the ceiling of what Asar Thompson can be, man, you leap at a chance to get a guy like that.
Absolutely, and it would be. We know that they wouldn't just trade that straight across. That's not what we're saying, but interesting their roles on the teams and their skills. So,
John Collins really felt like, especially first half, really struggled. The first half. Second half, he came in and played a lot better. But man, the first half, it just felt like, there was a moment he was like 6 for 10, and it felt so much worse.
He was hitting shots and did a decent job that way. So many slip ups on the defensive side.
Yeah.
And this is a team whose style he usually should match up with pretty good because they don't run a lot of cuts and screens and movements off of those screens where he usually struggles. So that one was a little bit puzzling. The shot, overall, I can't remember what he ended at. I know at one point we looked at it and he was a lot higher than we thought. He ended up 7 of 13, 2 of 6 from 3. So 17 points, but he did have a pretty rough plus minus in some of those stretches when this was a game of runs. There were a whole bunch of 7-0, 9-0 runs, 10-2 runs back and forth. He seemed to be caught on the backside of a bunch of those. 4 rebounds, 3 assists, had a couple of turnovers. Normally, if I would have had to have guessed before this game, I would have said he would have been fine defensively going up against these guys. But had some slip-ups. The good news with it all, we do get the win. We're going into a stretch that we talked about.
That could be extremely rough.
Get ready. It's
and that's the thing. If we play like we did tonight, we're going to get just demolished by those teams. We are. They're not going to give us the type of looks and open shots that we had. We're going to get blown off the court.
They'll punish the mistakes immediately.
And that's where it's an understanding of, great, we scored the most points we've ever scored, but we also let a team that has 3 wins on the season score 148 points. Yeah. Yes, it was in overtime. We allowed 138 points in regulation. That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem from any team. That's a huge problem from from the worst team in the NBA.
Worst team in history is looking like.
Yeah, so that's where kind of the frustrations with this game came from is because there's an understanding of like, man, you play like this in the stretch that we're going through, and it's gonna be brutal.
So it's Boston on Friday. I don't know if you watched any of that Boston OKC game. It was a heck of a game. OKC ends up closing it out at the end. It was in Oklahoma, and won the game. They were up on Boston by 15 in the fourth. Boston comes back. It was a great back and forth game, playoff atmosphere. It was fun. Boston is a monster. The way that they play with all their pieces and their defense, and there's a very good chance we could lose our next 4 games and still have positive signs. Yeah, right. We really can't measure it by wins and losses. If we manage to steal 1, great. If we manage to steal 2, hallelujah.
Right.
But we got to look for the signs. I would like to see us go back to a little bit of a defensive core with this team, which kind of seems like what we've gone away from the last couple of games.
Well, and that's the thing is a game like this, dude, like Chris Dunn kind of played lower minutes, but man, he was a badass when he was on the court.
Oh, dude.
And the moment he had with Jaden Ivey, when Jaden Ivey tries to out-physical him and stuff like that, and he ends up just falling to the ground, and he steps over him. And look, he gets a T there. That's fine. You need those guys on your team. Sexton right after sets a back screen and pops Jaden Ivey, right? That's you need those kind of players on your team. And Chris Dunn was a badass when he was on the court tonight defensively. He was a badass. And I would have liked to see him play more minutes tonight. The way he was playing, Walker Kessler defensively started kind of soft, missed a couple easy, really soft rebounds on
Yep.
Duren,
Yep.
and then really solidified to where it was hard to see him ever step off the court.
Yeah, very true. And like you mentioned a couple of shows ago, is this a psychological thing where Kessler is benefiting from coming off the bench? Does that kind of lift a little bit of the weight off of him? He seems to
He seems to be playing better off the bench.
There seems to be a little bit more consistency to him when he comes with him coming off the bench. That may not always be that, but that's just kind of thinking out loud here. But I would like to see us. I know that Will Hardy is always going to err to a modern, hip, offensive push. That's the kind of coach he is. But I would really love to see us go back to a little bit more of that defensive core of defense leads to offense. I understand that the offenses now and the skill set of players and teams now are different. We're not in 1993 anymore, right? The amount of skilled players on each team has gone through the roof. It's a different league. So you can't really say that, we're going to clamp them down and it's going to be the 2004 Pistons and that kind of stuff. But still, the defense and lockdown ability of teams is super important, especially down crunch time and when you get into playoffs. And I would really like to kind of get back a little bit more to that and have a little bit less of the isolation, a little bit less of the freewheeling offense.
And that's
that makes numbers.
Our team plays better when our team is all involved together, defensively and offensively. You can see the flow of the game on our side of the court is much better. Even a game like the Mavericks, where it was a really, we kind of grinded it out. The Heat, we grinded that out on the defensive side, which is a lot of times you have that grinded out mentality and you lose some stuff on the offensive end. We really didn't lose anything on the offensive end. We got better on the offensive end in those games. And like you said, in today's NBA, there's so many shot makers, so many creators and everything like that. You're not going to take away the offense all the time from players, from teams. It's just not going to happen. But because of that, if you give them open looks more consecutively, man, you are going to get eaten alive.
Absolutely. And even if you have just little spells or certain lineups of 3, 4, 5 minutes, and that's why a 15-point lead, a 20-point lead in this league today really doesn't mean what it did 20 years ago. Because if you have a little lapse, some of these groups will just torch offensively because they're so skilled, and all of a sudden that lead evaporates. So I would like to see a little bit more of a defensive, and you don't have to play all defensive players in one lineup, but have it more well thought out.
I'd like to see more lineups to see like Chris Dunn, Colin Sexton, Fontecchio, Markkanen, and Kessler. Then you have Sexton and Markkanen are in there offensively, and you have really good defensive players around them, with Markkanen being a solid defender and Sexton being a solid defender as well. Yeah. Those lineups, I feel like we are really good in.
I feel like we got to avoid the times when we sub in and we see Olynyk and Clarkson and Keontae George even all together at the table. We're like, oh boy, I hope this isn't one of those stretches because that gets pretty rough with some offensively creative players, but it gives up defensive. So I would like to see some smarter lineups together and kind of having a defensive presence with each lineup there on the court.
Right.
And then just kind of read a couple of our players if they're hot, if they're going to play down the stretch or what. But anyways, I'll be excited to watch, and my excitement over these next 4 games aren't going to be on the wins and losses. It's going to be how smart are our lineups together? How good is the fight? What are we developing? How do we adjust to adversity through the game?
Yeah.
And we've got dogs out there that will fight. It was like I was saying when Jaden Ivey was with Chris Dunn. I think Jaden Ivey is a tough dude, athletic, strong. He's got fight in him. But I don't think he wants Chris Dunn level. Dunn. I don't think he wants.
You don't want Chris Dunn.
I don't think he wants that. That's junkyard dog right there. Yeah. So, I mean, that got me pretty pumped. I love that. But those are the things I'm looking for. Friday at Boston, and then we've got Saturday and then Monday, right? Yeah. Boston, Philadelphia, at Milwaukee.
Right.
So
all at. We're all 3 on the road, so it's strap in. For our next 4 games especially, strap in right now. But we said that 4 games ago, and so far hasn't hit us yet. So I guess we'll see what happens. Like I said, don't focus more on numbers, and that's why a game like this, it's like, holy crap, we scored the most points ever, and I'm not freaking jumping with joy, right? It's
Yeah.
we're looking for, what are we building? What habits are we building? What things are we building as this team?
Because we've definitely grown in the last
No
10,
question.
15 games. We're a
No
completely
question.
different team.
Yep.
And props to the players and the staff for everybody doing that. Let's get a true measurement where we're at, and no better way to do that than hop in the fire.
Yep. 100%.
Here comes
100%. So we'll see. We'll see what happens Friday. Friday?
Friday at Boston.
Yep. We'll see you guys Friday.